Leo Cordovi is a contemporary painter. He was born in Havana, Cuba in 1994. At the age of 15, he immigrated to the United States and in 2019 received a bachelor's in fine art from the University of Central Florida. His bio states, with a focus in acrylic painting, his work offers expressive mark making and an underlaying and overlaying of colors that aim to blur the line between naturalism and abstraction. So that is what we're going to put to the test tonight. I would describe Leo as beautifully self-aware and accessible, a painter of little or no pretense, wonderful, innocent human being. I know that's just my definition, but also one who's not afraid of a fight. So as a current 2021-22 Artist in Action here at A&H, he shares the studio of our founder, J. Andre Smith, with his artist partner, Mayor Martinez. So without further ado, please welcome Leo Cordovi.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah. So like I said, I came away with a wealth of, I know you don't know the questions I'm going to ask, but you spoke so eloquently the other night, and I'm just trying to push you a little bit in that direction, and I just want you to feel comfortable to go any way you want to go tonight. The things you shared really changed my perspective of how I saw your work. So, yeah. So to set the stage for our discussion of your work tonight, I feel we must address something that you and I discussed last weekend. So you have an anniversary coming up 3 years from now, and that will be a pivotal one in how you see your identity. You are approaching the mark where you will be 15 years in the United States, the same amount of time you spent in Cuba before immigrating. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right.
So from our talk, it seems like this is an important milestone and that you are figuring out how to navigate. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I was talking to Mary last night about something around that realm, and it's what I call the immigration process. Is not necessarily like the get on a plane or whatever vehicle and get to the other destination. It's more about that readaptation process, that re-entering, right? And 15 years, it's just not that much. That's exactly the time that I was gaining somewhat of my identity in Cuba. You get to meet, you develop new real relationships, like adult relationships in a way, and to be stripped from that, and then being thrown in another land, and then readapt or relearn that as an adult. It's tough, and definitely there's a reconciliation process in there that needs to happen afterwards. But yeah, 15 years there, 15 years here, almost. It blurs the lines, it's not from here, not from there. Yeah, it's
Yeah, you said it was an interesting time, right?
It is.
It's funny that for me, obviously I haven't had to wrestle with that, but for me, you were already, even though it's 3 years away, you were already looking to that date.
Oh, there is anticipation to it.
Right.
Because I still don't know who I'm going to be in 3 years from now. Obviously, I hope to be the person that I want to be. But I think that to the psychological level, the constantly erasing of who you think you are, or what's you, like your culture, your growing up, your habits, your language, your family, everything, your environment, right? To be the stripping of that through the passage of time, and the regaining of a new identity, right? That I think it's gonna be there is anticipation. It's the middle point, and then from there, everything is different, because eventually that 15 years from the beginning will be very minimum compared to the lifespan, right? So.
Right. Do you feel it's harder as you move forward towards that date to hold on to things that you once felt very dear and considered important in your first 15 years? Is that what you're kind of mentioning? Like, does that make sense? Like, as you move forward towards that date, you almost had this apprehension of like, losing one important part of your identity and gaining this one that you were uncertain about?
Oh, but it's inevitable. You know, it's time. It's that you can't stop it. So I don't know. I think that it's not that it gets easier. It's just that because it's inevitable, you are mentally prepared to endure that, and in a way you attach yourself to some memories, but eventually those memories fragmentate, and they're not even the real memory anymore. You know, it's a memory of a memory. So
Right.
so you do lose everything, and even if you cling to it, eventually it'll be less than what I know now. So therefore, I think that it'll be easier to forget, to not know. You know. So
No, that makes sense. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So that's a great segue to my next question. And so in discussing your recent work, you beautifully equated this sense of being an immigrant to one finding yourself lost in an unfamiliar landscape. While the setting can be visually appealing, one must always be aware and in tune with your senses. You said there's this unconscious sense of not belonging, as well as an obscure, like you were making reference to your paintings at this point, you know, these obscure passages that you sense as harsh or non-welcoming, even threatening. And is that what you're seeking to convey in this new body work, the new paintings that we're going to see later?
Yeah, 100%. With the red, yeah.
Right.
100%. I think that it's more of like alluding to specific moments in the process of the readaptation or the integration. I don't want to call it readaptation. I want to say integration because, it's. And I'm not necessarily talking about like literal like. I went to the store and I didn't know how to buy something because I didn't know the language at the time. I'm talking about to the inner me, you know, to the psychological level. The being aware of the developing of a new character inside of you, you know, from even the point of view of language to because you know it's interesting. Even I don't know those of you who are bilingual, but when I speak Spanish in my house with my parents, my personality is completely different than when I speak English now with you and you guys. So yeah, so to be aware of almost like this baby growing up inside of you that is you, that is eventually going to kill who you were. It's I don't know. You have to endure like some sort of like it's a resistance, but at the same time it's like an allowance because you have to like, hey, this needs to happen, you know, as much as you want to cling to what you know. So does that answer your question?
You know, it's funny. I know this is going to be a weird reference, but I was telling somebody about that. There's a science fiction movie called Arrival, but the basic tenet of the movie is
Spielberg.
When you learn a different language, it actually rewires your brain because that language is not just a means of communication.
100%.
It's cultural. It's all the ways that the people process time and their environment and everyth
Right, right. Yeah, from the lingos and you know like the first words that you learn in a new language, they are just a reflection of like the current culture and therefore it's inherently different already. So. Yeah, it's.
I remember trying to. I really wanted to learn French. I was working at a gallery in New York, and a lot of our clients were French. So I was like, I really wanted to learn French, and I didn't have the kind of time I needed to allocate to do it. But when I started to understand what would happen in that transition, I was so ingrained in my Americanisms and my American way of thinking that it wasn't necessarily the communication of words and the learning of words. But it was this whole rewiring of my understanding about, you know, the pacing of life and things that are important, and you know, there's like cultural things that aren't necessarily just written things or translated things. It was just amazing, and I couldn't do it. I didn't survive the process, and I didn't last as long as I wanted, obviously. But no, I came out with a real respect of like, you know, when people say like, oh, bilingual, there really is something going on there with just more than just this ability to communicate in two languages, you know.
100%, yeah. 100%.
Okay, so an important aspect of your work that we haven't touched upon, you know, is one of memory. and specifically reconstructed memories of the places you once felt familiar. You had mentioned to me the landscapes of Cuba when you were a child, these things that still have an influence on you. And you actually defined to me your works as incredibly personal, even the processing of trauma. You said you didn't want to touch on themes that were political or social, and you saw your work as a connecting point to share these experiences. You talked about this amplified mood that acts as a trigger. Is that an accurate thing that I got from what you were saying the other night?
Yeah. And we were talking about the landscape inherently being theatrical, and,
right.
and the amplification of or the use of all the moods that it can provide to convey settings that make you feel something.
It was beautiful because it really tapped into, it was that transition from a written language to an unspoken language, right, to a visual language.
Correct.
But it was still that transition and that conveyance of mood and setting, and that setting would, like you said, this theatricality that you were trying to convey, but that would actually trigger this something in the viewer. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. And I think that to talk about that, I guess like you have to also bring my previous work where it was more traditional looking landscapes, like your regular green, blue sky, where the goal was more to find an encompassing space of some sort. In a way, a place for myself, a mental place. And I guess that this work departures from that in the way that through the use of color, I am trying to allude to the audiences what I was doing before with brushstroke, and like it's less is more, and I think that
making reference to the red paintings now, is that correct?
Right. And I think that less sometimes adds to the mysticism, and not that there's mysticism, but it allows for also other conversations to be brought up. Because like ultimately, what you're gonna see in my paintings is not what I think about my paintings, right? So, and that's something you have to be okay. I have to be okay with it, but I think that the color, it's something that how did I get there? I guess experimenting a little bit with that's something that Malin did for me actually when I was talking to Hannah. I think that having the space here truly gave me that, hey, stop, like you gotta like reevaluate what you're doing and like do it correctly if you're gonna do it. If not, don't do it. So and tapping into like my identity in a more profound way. I guess what I'm saying is that in order to translate something that needed to feel more genuine, I needed something that was more dramatic, so that it was in your face. It was confrontational, right? And I started experimenting with more browns. I realized that the use of Mara and I were talking about this last night. Again, the use of blue. It's more nostalgic. It's cool. It's different. The red. It's truly it's shocking. It's not welcoming, but at the same time, the way that I'm trying to work with shadows and a non-specific time of day or time, right? That comes from my previous work. I think that all those are qualities that or features of my work that help convey the message in this way, in this new way that I'm doing.
It's funny because when I first saw the red paintings, I thought of a period of time that I had gone through when I was wrestling with this element or issue of theatricality in my work, and these brilliant reds kept appearing in the work, and I didn't know if I was trying to go through them or trying to go around them. I didn't know how they were being used as a vehicle for me to convey. But when I was preparing for the talk, I was re-looking at your red work, and it became, and I think people can see it tonight when we go in your studio, it became very like visceral and almost like like fleshy and physical. It had this kind of sense of like foreboding that I didn't know, like I didn't see before. I just thought the color was like attracting me, but when I spent time with it, you know, like theatricality is all about that, getting someone's gaze in a way, you know,
Right.
like, right?
Right, that's the first part of
The
it,
first
right.
part of it, right? But then what happens is when the curtain's pulled back, what's going to be revealed behind the curtain,
Right.
And when I saw the curtain pulled back, I got this real sense of this bodiliness of it, like the physicality of it, you know, which I hadn't seen before, which is amazing because I love when that happens when you spend a little bit of time with someone's work. That's the kind of gift you get from giving someone's work a little bit of time. But I think we'll see it in the studio tonight because I saw it in there when I was talking to you before, that it starts to be almost like a, you know, like when you look at like macro photography of, you know, bodily fluids and bodily, you know, like bodily processes and stuff, you see these incredible reds and these transitions of lines that are networks of fluids and stuff. It almost reminded me of that, which was the scale started to shift, which was wonderful, which was really wonderful, which I didn't notice at first, you know.
Well, yeah, so there is no, you know, there is not a specific answer to why the red, but the specific medium that I'm using definitely lets you know that this painting that is in front of you, there is something in there that doesn't belong there, and I guess that's the number two after capturing, you know, with the red. It's, oh wait, this red doesn't belong here. So I think that it's all about that. Again, it goes back to the negotiation of not belonging, but having to belong, or growing, or rooting, you know, in a place where. So yeah, it's meant to be yeah. it's doing all.
Does it go back to that trigger comment we point in, like? Because some triggers lead people one way and some triggers lead people another, you know. But it kind of had that meaning for me, you know. It was kind of obvious, or it was kind of unfamiliar at first, but then it started to conjure up all associations for me. And I think that the beautiful part is that it'll have that effect differently for every viewer that goes in there, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so so the issues that you're wrestling with, the ones that we're speaking of, and that you see associated with the landscape genre in your work. Throughout art history, these have been linked with the concept of the sublime, right? That's a term that's often thrown around. But it's a place that's often linked to a sense of terror due to its grandeur, its scale, its inaccessibility. One that both you, as the artist, along with the viewer, are always approaching but never arriving at. This is something we kind of discussed briefly the other night. And you said that was something that you felt like you were in the process of right now, where you were always kind of be approaching this subject matter in your work, but you never would be concluding the sentence. Is that correct?
Right. And I think that goes back to why it's personal, because it's a direct translation to memories that have been fragmented now, and that I'm presenting to you through the landscape as a vehicle, right, as a universal vehicle. Yeah, it goes back to the 3 years to 15 here, 15 years here, 15 years back then. I don't know. It's a process that accompanies me as I go through. You know, as I progress, they progress, and then new feelings.
Right. So the before I move on to my last question and we take some audience questions, we talked about you being a landscape painter that doesn't paint landscapes. Do you want to clarify that for the?
So I'm not a landscape painter. I am not a landscape painter. Yeah.
No, but I mean that was something. Just elaborate on that briefly, because when you shared that with me, I thought it was great. Because I look at your, I don't necessarily look at your paintings as landscapes. You know what I mean?
So I guess from an academical point of view, even being interested back at home in Cuba when I was a kid and studying art in the equivalent of high school over there, I found all of these like painters from like what's called the old vanguard, and it's all these painters that went to Paris in like the 30s and 40s in Cuba, and they studied with Picasso and Cubism and all these French painters. And then when they went back to Cuba due to political issues, they searched back within the cultural roots in a way. They tried to refine what it meant for them, home, that sense of home, and that's interesting because they went for leisure in a way, for pleasure, to learn. They went to the academy, to Paris, so to go back and still have that feeling of like nostalgia so deep that you need to like, similar to the one that now have, but like due to political reasons cannot be. I can't just go back.
Right.
Yeah. So all these painters tackle the landscape. They just went direct to the landscape to talk about the issues that they were bringing up, and I think that always stuck with me. And then having the coming to the States and immediately falling in love with like the parks and finding like that peace and serenity, and then realizing that everything that was around me was also in Cuba, because especially in Florida, we're like 90 miles away. So I truly felt at home out of nowhere in the middle of Florida. I was like, whoa, this is a super universal vehicle, and I'm going to use it. I want to use the heck out of it. So, yeah, I'm not a landscape painter.
That clarifies a lot for me. I appreciate it.
I am just using it as a,
Okay, I'm going to ask one really obscure question before we move on to the audience questions, because I know there's some great questions out there.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I couldn't, after one conversation with you, not the last one, but one a long time ago, I thought of this weird reference, right? And it was actually this biblical reference. But listen to this passage in consideration, in relation to your work. So I want you to solve, because no one can figure out what this means. So you're going to solve 2,000 years of conflict with this one interview right here. Okay, so.
No problem.
Oh wait, let me make sure I asked you the right one, because we want to be able to solve it. Okay, so here's this metaphysical question, right? So a passage I read years ago that I couldn't get beyond in your work, and it talks about Jesus going to heal this blind man, right? And the people around him begged Jesus to touch this guy and lay his hands on him and heal him, and so he spits in the guy's eyes, right?
Jesus does?
Jesus does, right? Spits in the guy's eyes, and then he says, okay, do you see anything, right? Listen to this. And the guy says, I see men as trees walking around. Nobody has ever been able to figure this out, so I want you to figure this out. I want you in front of the group to solve this 2,000-year-old dilemma. And oh, there you go. Wait.
No, I'm kidding.
No, and then the funny thing was the guy says, I see men as trees walking around. And then Jesus, I guess, doesn't get flustered by that. He lays his hands on him again, and the guy supposedly sees perfectly and clearly, right? But I love that, thinking about your work. I know that sounds completely weird, but I was like, oh my God, men as trees walking around. Like, I'm never going to be able to resolve it with myself.
If I know something about history, is that we always try to like amplify that's not there. So I'm just going to go straight with it. He just didn't want to get spit again on his eyes. And he told some crazy shit. That's it.
I'm so happy I asked that question. I was like, there's no way I'm going to answer that question. I was like, no, I have to ask that. Because it was like, no, it's funny because I was thinking, oh my God, it's like the perfect question for Leo. And that's like the perfect answer to the question.
I don't want to get spit in my eyes twice.
No, that's it. So there it is. You solved it. That's exactly what it is. You solved the dilemma. The 2,000-year-old question got solved. Well, listen, man, I don't want to keep people from having a time with you and with Mayor in the studio.
Yeah.
Is there anything that I haven't touched upon before we go to audience questions that you want to talk about?
I think you're a stalker because you know me pretty well. No, it's been great talking to you, not only today but throughout the course of the program or my stay here. It's been a developing conversation.
All right, thank you everybody for coming tonight. We appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you.